Hello, everyone. I am Stephen Robinson, otherwise known as the Playtyper Guy, as my son calls me. I'm here with Robin Panacchia, as always. And today, let's just hop right into it. We're covering the latest um, regularly scheduled school shooting. What makes this one, I suppose, different is that we kind of assumed Republicans were never going to address gun violence and there would be sort of thoughts and prayers. But in this instance, they are repulsively leaping on the identity, the gender identity of the shooter. It was revealed that the shooter, um, keeping with my normal practice, I never identify the shooter by name. The shooter is transgender, and that we have no idea if that is a motive or at all relevant, but Marjorie Taylor Greene responding, who will later be profiled on 60 Minutes, despite a week of her behaving like someone who would have been fired from a college newspaper when I was working in it. If you wrote an article leaping to the conclusion of just like this transgender shooter is targeting Christians and let's stop talking about guns with no data, um, you'd lose your job. But she is a sitting member of Congress who's able to directly target a marginalized group with no data. I mean, this person is transgender. That is not relevant. I mean, the New York Post, um, Tucker Carlson, others have brought that out. Whether it's relevant, when I mean it's not relevant to all other trans people who did not murder people last week, and so it is not their identity. Um, so, Robin, did you see where Josh Hawley had uh,
Oh, the
pleaded
hate crime.
for a hate crime? Keep in
He doesn't
mind,
believe in hate
Republicans have
crimes. He doesn't
never.
want hate crimes he votes against hate crimes being a thing, but in this case, it's a hate crime. Yeah, no, they're all full of it.
um, so, for clarity's purpose, our hate crime legislation stemming specifically to Matthew Shepard, a gay young man who was murdered because he was gay, and James Byrd, a black man who was murdered in Texas because he was black by racists. And so these people leaping on these crimes to attack trans people and to be in this sort of, oh, poor pity me Christian attitude is specifically repulsive. Um, because also George Will had argued, along with many other Republicans, that charging the men who murdered Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia with a hate crime was essentially a form of thought crime. You've already convicted them. Why are you attacking them for what their thoughts were? And even then, it was such a high level. They literally had to show, because the guy had, when standing over Arbery's dying body, shouted the N word at him. So that is what triggered it. It would be very hard otherwise. They always have very high standards of what does it. There is no evidence that the shooter targeted these people because they are Christian. It's not even like they targeted a church.
His
It was a
former
former
school,
student, which is the MO of almost all mass shootings. And
yeah,
it's specifically never stated. These people never state this. Marjorie Greene is a driveling racist, but Josh Hawley damn well knows. Mike Pence damn well knows. And when they take that out of context to say this is an attack on Christians is obscene. And, again, if a white student at a historically black college or at a school that is predominantly black comes back and shoots up the school, there is no immediate evidence it is a hate crime just because the victims were predominantly black. There would be levels of figuring out what is the racial animus. We did not even leap to that conclusion with Dylan Roof
yeah,
because they had to go and find where he was basically, a Tucker Carlson um, acolyte of stuff
yeah.
about Rhodesia and so forth. But this is just repulsive. I wrote about how when you are a minority, you live your life of the idea of like, as long as I am perfect, and I knew this very early on, as long as I am perfect, people will not see my race. They will just judge me. But if I screw up, it's not just me. I've screwed up for every Black person in the world. Every job later, they'll never hire another Black person because of my mistake. They will judge my mistakes because of me. And it's a crappy thing to hold on to hold on to, but it is to see that again where you had JD Vance saying that trans people are inherently violent, they are mentally ill. Eric Erickson said others they were writing about doing red flag laws, which they normally don't support, but specifically for trans people.
Yeah,
Trans
they're
people
fine with that. Well, here's the thing. Like I said before, they are indeed full of shit. Like, they don't sincerely believe any of the things that they are saying. I really don't. I think that they are transphobic. I think that they love guns, but I think they know an angle when they see one and something that they think benefits them. And they know that Christians, like of a particular variety, really do respond well and like hearing about how they're oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that a lot of white people like hearing, oh, you're the oppressed ones now, which in their mind means we're the good ones. The whole idea of Christians being oppressed has been a very, very big one on the right for a long time now. Then you have the whole issue where it's guns. What they want, like more than anything, every single time there is a school shooting, every time there's a mass shooting, what they want is for it to not be about guns. It can be about literally anything else. It can be about mental health. It can be about doors. It can be about anything. But what they want is for it to not be about guns because they don't want anyone coming for their guns. For this particular situation, it was a gift to them because they're so angry at trans people right now.
Well, I guess I would disagree. It's like, I think they do sincerely believe this. The reason they don't want anyone coming for their guns is that there is this fear of violent reprisal. I think that traces back. I mean, the 1619 Project covered it. What makes America different about guns? The bottom line is racial oppression,
I would agree
genocide,
with that,
outright genocide, the fear of. And so when Tucker Carlson was talking about trans people starting to arm themselves or queer people starting to arm themselves, where it's not necessarily a terrible thing to do when people are talking about, if you put it in their art, why, Lauren Boebert, do you want guns? She would probably say, oh, if the government comes to try to take my kids away, I would respond with guns. Well, okay, what if you're parents of a queer child and you're of a trans child and there's a risk of them, they are incapable of seeing it that way. All they can really empathize with is that I would respond this way with violence if this was happening to me. I want to play this clip from Malcolm X because I think it's quite.
The charge of violence against us actually stems from the guilt complex that exists in the conscious and subconscious minds of most white people in this country. They know that they've been violent in their brutality against Negroes, and they feel that someday the Negro is going to wake up and try and do unto them as they have do unto the whites as the whites have done unto us. We aren't a violent group. We do.
Yep.
And that's been the case forever. And I think it's beyond race, it's beyond whatever group you are oppressing. So, and we've talked about this, where in Nazi Germany, they're oppressing the Jews, they're pushing them out, and it's like, and then suddenly it was like, oh, they might be real mad. What if they come back collectively?
Yeah.
They'll just, well, okay, well, all we need to do now is to exterminate them. And L. Frank Baum said the same thing, the author of the Wizard of Oz, where it's like, oh, we've really wiped out these natives. We need to wipe them out completely because they're going to be really mad and come back at us. So that rage is, I think, again, they understand in trans people, other than just saying, oh, you're right, I'm going to go in a closet forever, or I'm not going to be trans. If you try to essentially legislate me out of existence, okay. You use terms like exterminating transgenderism, okay, that's fine. If you express any anger
Yeah.
or
Well,
rage or fear, then they react. It's like, oh no, you are coming for us, which is typical. I mean, it's been predictable.
certainly, they're aware of the fact that they're treating people poorly. It's not like they think, this is a normal way to treat people, or that, other people would not react poorly to that people will not react poorly to the way that they are being treated. They're very well aware of that. And so therefore they have it in their heads that, we need to make sure that we can defend ourselves against these people when after, we treat them poorly. Like they have to be scared on some level of the people that they have fucked with. And
Yeah.
the biggest fear always is that the people that if equality happens, then the people that they oppress are going to rise up and do it to them.
Well, that's always been the fear.
Or
The
the
fear,
vengeance.
the
Yeah.
slave patrols starting because
Yeah.
the constant fear of slave uprising, when you got to points where Black people were outnumbering the enslavers, it's like, oh, this could be really bad. But obviously our history avoids teaching that there were uprisings, that modern
Mhm.
policing stems from that. The fear of when Black people are gathered together, and no one wants to like discuss that, right? The idea that it is to the point of being sort of hardwired. I wouldn't say genetically because I don't believe in crap race science, but I think
Yeah.
culturally, like you grow up a certain way. Culturally, this comes over and over. The fear of the other in
Yeah.
a large group gathered together. Are they conspiring against you? Are they sort of doing stuff? So when the
But it's
trans
also
day,
common sense. If you are treating those people poorly, if it's very obvious that, there are haves and have-nots, then yeah, people are going to come for you. Like, you feel like people are going to come for you. They're going to come for what you have.
Mhm.
Or they're going to punish you for the way that you treated them. Like it's just common sense.
Well,
Like,
and here's where I bash the left because I bash everyone equally. So there are a lot of gender essentialists. Many of them, many if not all, are turfs as well. But so they're the folks who are like, the world would be a wonderful, happy utopia if all men vanished because women are inherently are docile and peaceful, and my world would be wonderful if all men vanished. Um, and I think what happened, and if you were reading some of the stuff from these gender essentialists who are already transphobic, J.K. Rowling's, the idea of, okay, well, this person was classified or assigned female at birth, did something that is traditionally associated with toxic masculinity.
mhm.
Um, the sort of Travis Bickle checklist of stockpiling the armory, coming back. Traditionally speaking, that is usually
Yeah.
damaged young men. So clearly, this is the evidence of where gender affirming care has screwed up this person who would not have been violent before that, even though they're the same
Mhm.
people who say gender affirming care doesn't make someone assigned male at birth a woman. There's no way
Mhm.
for that person is still a threat to me. That's still a man in a dress. That's still a threat to me. That is still someone who's going to um, unfairly steal um, opportunities for me in sports and so forth and everything. So it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't with trans
Well,
people.
the interesting thing is that at first, a lot of these people thought that it was a trans woman attacking the school, and for the gender essentialists, their reaction was,
Mhm.
they're doing a male thing. And so that is their proof, but it was in fact a trans man. And, that sort of undermined their whole entire theory that they had going on there.
Well,
So
their view that testosterone is toxic. I mean,
yeah.
they're not consistent. They don't believe that um a trans woman taking estrogen or not all of these testosterone, but that doesn't, you're still a man, you're still a threat.
Mhm.
But they still think, oh, filling up this person with testosterone, the evil juice,
Yeah.
They
Well, I mean,
rapist
even
uses
like
whatever.
I think it was J.K. Rowling or someone talking to her that was referring to, oh well, we're putting people in prisons that have done, are inclined to male crimes, which like, I mean, no, I mean, like, I think that we socialize men to some degree to be more likely
Mhm.
to resort to violence. But I don't think it's just like, oh, it's the testosterone it's
Oh
just
yeah.
built right in. People
Yeah, I
like
mean
the
the studies
idea very
this yeah.
much in general of like badness just being built right in. It makes them feel safe because then they're like, I know for a fact that I'm a good person because the badness isn't built into me. And that's also
Yeah.
the argument for rampant incarceration. It's a whole freaking thing. Like,
All this I think all the studies about differences between how men and women might try to take their own lives usually can be traced to socialization. A man kills himself like Hemingway, and a woman doesn't want to be seen with her head blown up. All
yeah,
socialization, not like there's
women think
something in
about
your
who has
head.
to clean up afterwards.
Yeah, this is all socialization, not that you are inherently a person or not.
Yeah.
But I do think there is that form of gender essentialism is damaging. I don't think it's effective, but it is that where um, the strange bedfellows. You have the gender essentialists like the Rowlings linking up
Mhm.
with the Matt Walshes, and it's like, okay, well, Matt Walsh wouldn't want you writing Harry Potter at all. So I don't know why you want to team up with this person. How much do you hate trans people that, despite everything else you
That's pretty
believe,
much what's happening. Like you see these people who at one point considered themselves feminists interacting with like the least feminist people on earth. But that is, I hate to say it, it kills me, but that is a thing that has happened historically. The worst stuff in the world always comes from a certain faction of feminists getting together with the Christian right. Like every time that happens, it's a bad time. It happened in the 1980s with what we call the porn wars, and my side won the porn wars. I did not fight in the porn wars. I was a child, but um, the sex positive feminists won over the anti-porn feminists who had hooked up with the Christian right in order to go after porn. Um,
a
and
slight
that was a whole thing.
and a slight digression there. I see this from, again, the left and the right,
Mhm.
and it's obviously relevant politically right now. Stormy Daniels is with adult film star act. She is not less credible. Whatever Trump did with her, did not do with her, is somehow more shameful because she's a porn star. And when I see, and I've
Mhm.
seen, and again, everyone, like liberals from Pete Buttigieg to conservatives to Ron DeSantis, people will say, "Oh, what a dunk," because like, "Oh, I don't know anything about porn," sleeping with a porn star or whatever is such a, I don't know. I mean, how she makes her living, I don't find somehow more
Well,
or
because they
less
think it's more
honorable.
salacious. And there's a huge amount of anti-sex worker rhetoric and feeling that does come from certain factions of the left. It's, either a very paternalistic view or it's the, as our friend Cryptide mentioned, the McKinnon Dworkin factor. But I think in this case, a lot of it's the, the hashtag resistance people who like love being able to say LOL porn star, like that sort of thing. And on the right, they like to be able to say, oh, well, she's not credible because she has sex for a living. As if
Um,
that's somehow less honorable a profession than working at Fox News, which I would argue it's not.
yes, selling your body. People sell their bodies in many ways. Oh my goodness. So, Miss Lundy. So all Dems are talking about is the poor, victimized trans people as if they are justified in their violence.
Yeah, this is
No,
someone who does not like us.
that is not true. So, if you know, the burning bed lady who set her husband on fire or whatever, I don't justify setting your spouse on fire, though the larger context is why she set her husband on fire,
Mhm.
and that she wasn't committing a hate crime against men. She
Yeah.
was actually targeting
Angry at
specifically
her particular husband.
and her abuser. So
Yeah.
if there's a revelation that this person had been tormented or otherwise feeling ostracized by the people at his school, that does not justify violence, but it is also not a hate crime. It is not attacking strangers who are of a certain group or a gender. I mean, there is literally no
Mhm.
evidence so far that it is because these people are Christians or believe. Also, Christians inherently having a animus against trans people is itself not necessarily true of all Christians. So it doesn't mean
And
that
trans
I
people
was
automatically
targeted.
being atheists, also not a thing.
Yes, I feel like there's this sort of ostracization. So the othering of
Mhm.
the shooter, again, it's not someone I am supporting. I'm supporting the idea that this person is not, when you're billing this as a transgender shooter's attack on Christians without the idea this person might have went to a Christian school, probably grew up Christian.
Mhm.
This is sort of an internal, perhaps domestic civil issue that is not
Yeah.
shifting it as the godless awful, as Tucker Carlson said, when his rant about how Christians and trans people are inherently um, different. Christians are humble. They love, because Tucker Carlson is humble and
Oh,
gentle
yeah,
and
that
kind,
is definitely
inherently
a
kind
word I
person.
would use to
But
describe Tucker
but
Carlson.
trans people, he said, think of themselves as God because they can believe they can change their sex. And so if you dare say they aren't God, they will strike you down. And he's doing sort of Nazi stuff on uh on the eight
Yeah, trying
o'clock
to make
hour.
like the burning of the Reichstag is really like
Yeah, at a certain point, it's like, look, you've been ignoring your loved ones, especially if you're a white liberal, you've probably been ignoring your loved ones who watch Tucker Carlson. But at a certain point, you're kind of like,
I don't have any, luckily. Like,
yeah, you are, look, this is what they're watching Nazi stuff at this point. I'm not saying you need to cut them out of your lives or whatever. Just need to be aware they are watching Nazi crap, and this is and as someone noted, people who watched and supported Nazi crap were Nazis. That was like, those are the group, that
yeah.
was all one group called Nazis. And so this is what these folks are becoming, and this is what they are promoting. And it'll never stop at one, to quote great leader Optimus Prime. You'll never stop at one. So they'll never stop at this group. They're gonna find someone else they loathe or
They
hate or
they
whatever.
never
They're
do
motivated
stop.
by they're just motivated by a sense of hatred. You see themselves attacking their own members. They're I mean,
Mhm.
Jenna Ellis, who's a terrible human being and was attacking, who's homophobic and was attacking Buttigieg. Well, then it's like mocking an old man who fell. She was
Yeah.
mocking Mitch McConnell. It's like, okay, well, you just hate everybody. There's like, you're gonna find someone to hate and some reason to hate. And it's
Well, that's how, I mean, honestly, what else do they have to sell? Like, really, like, what else do Republicans have to sell? All, like, other than, hey, we're going to punish the people who are like, who you don't like and you think you're better than, and we're going to keep them from hurting you in retaliation for the way that you treat them. If they
that's
don't have
sold for a
that,
long time, but that's been selling for a long
yeah,
time. I
it
mean,
sells really well. And otherwise, what do they have to sell people? Literally nothing. What are they going to say? Like, oh, it'd be really exciting for you is when we give tax breaks to people who are not a lot richer than you are.
mhm.
Like, I don't,
Yeah.
that's not really like a great selling point, which is why you will notice Republicans have largely backed off of their own economic arguments.
Well,
They
that's a
don't talk
different
about
breed of
anything.
Republican. The good Republicans and the ones who, Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and even Joe Biden and, Aaron Sorkin, they romanticize the good Republicans, but the good Republicans
Who are
have
like,
awful economic policies, awful, like Paul Ryan's economic policies aren't successful. So when
they just hate poor people. That's fine. Like,
yeah, and what is successful was that sort of faux populism from first Trump to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they would be fine. They're like, a lot of these folks would be fine with a total what we would deem socialism for white people, because
yeah.
the inherent wink wink nudge nudge is like the lessers will never get access to this. So yeah, we're not going to take away your social security and your Medicare. It's like the old school. It is usually the old school Republicans, the quote unquote good Republicans, who are talking about, oh, we've got to look at entitlement reform. And it's the way Trump is hitting DeSantis, he's like, this is a rhino who liked Paul Ryan's healthcare plan. It's going to come for your. He's like, he got like, here's the rhetoric we can use, because the white people know it's only about you. So I think what happens is that these sort of quote unquote good Republicans thought that before, it's like, okay, we will lead with the very respectable country club stuff, and underneath is just the attacks on queer people and minorities, and we'll use terms like law and order and so forth. But it just doesn't resonate. What resonates is Marjorie Taylor Greene's outright saying trans people are awful and I'm going to destroy these people and I'm going to go, do all of that. Where is she being punished for it? So something I was working on was about the Shameless appearance tonight on 60 Minutes. I will watch it. I've already written the article, but I'm going to watch it for the sake of, dotting all the I's. But, any chance that Leslie Stahl was going to give it to Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of fell apart when this weekend Greene is talking about how she admires Leslie Stahl and had a great time. Marjorie Taylor Greene is evil, but she's not stupid. She's also someone who kind of would know if someone is aggressively coming at her. She would probably notice. Maybe they really, really edit it. So, but I don't think that's the case. I think what's going to happen is that she is probably treated by Leslie Stahl as a serious person, which is what she kind of wants. And it just, to me, is hilarious, because I remember in 2020, there was the whole anti-squad, the force from women of color, respectable women of color, who were going to go up against the bad women of color who the Republicans hate, centrists don't like. And in fact, it would be impossible. Those comments would be deleted, but it would be impossible for anyone to read any article about noted white nationalist Marjorie Taylor Greene by saying, oh, but also these black women suck. Or these minority women. Usually, like, okay, well, can you at least let the actual article go about the white supremacist before bashing the actual people targeted by the white supremacists?
Yeah.
But anyway, the members of the force were going to be the respectable Republican squad. And Kevin McCarthy at the time, the minority leader, was like, he was going to just, okay, well, I need the votes. I need these, Bobart and Greene, but I'm going to take care of them. She was going to put them in the closet. They'll be the crazy folks. But obviously these respectable folks are going to be the one running, which hasn't happened. No one knows the name of these force members. They're laughable. If you look at their Twitter feed, it's all just, repeating the talking points from Marjorie Taylor Greene. Same as Lucy Fawley. Yeah. It's like going, so the true leader of the party is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Leslie Stahl. You go from something I talk about in the piece for tomorrow is that, this does matter, because in the 1950s, at the height of McCarthyism, Edward R. Murrow laid into McCarthy, like ripped him apart, just dismantled him. There wasn't this sort of, hey, let me interview Senator McCarthy, and he's playing with a puppy, and we're walking through his backyard, and he talks about this favorite recipe that he makes or something. Like, there's no normalization of McCarthy. It wasn't this Vanity Fair celebrity treatment of him. It was, no, I'm hammering you as a terrible person. They're not, which should be happening to Greene. She is someone who tried to overthrow the government.
Oh, for sure. But what a lot of people have really leaned into is the idea that the real problem is that we're all so divided. Not that, a bunch of people have just gone right off the deep end, but that we're divided. It doesn't matter. It doesn't literally matter like why we're divided. If, we could be divided on, hey, should we stab people in the face? The real problem is that we're divided. And that is obvious nonsense, but that's what they're going with. And they think that there is this, if we can just bring some civility back.
Yes.
If civility has ever been a thing for us as Americans, a lot of,
it means like not fundamentally not addressing evil, like having no moral standing, like evil. Like if we treat her nicely enough, there's a list. This one gentleman who said agree to disagree about Greene being stupid. I disagree with many of my colleagues online, elsewhere, even Wonkette, that Greene is stupid, or Boebert it's stupid. I feel like that misses the point. For one thing, because if they are stupid, what the hell am I? I ain't in Congress. So I ain't writing no legislation. I don't speak no Portuguese, as Elaine Bennett said. So, if they're stupid, what's all of us? Because we aren't we don't have the Speaker of the House, rubbing our feet and doing whatever, so
there are different kinds of smarts.
Oh yeah. And I think what matters is the moral, like maybe you feel better. It's a whole kind of, I call it the Sorkinism. Maybe we feel better by like, oh, how stupid this person is when they are kicking our butt.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like that benefits something. And as you were saying, different types of stupidity.
I don't think that it goes over the way that people think it does. I really don't. Like the well, we're smarter kind of thing. Like doesn't, that always has a little bit of there are ways to do it, I think. But there's also a way that it can come across as very like, teacher, you forgot to assign the homework. And, you got to know if you're the kind of person who can pull it off or not. And a lot of people are not.
And maybe stupid is the wrong term. Let's put it this way. So Joe Biden's a nice guy. I feel like he's a very nice guy. Whatever I might disagree with him, certain political issues, I agree with him more than I disagree with him, but people have trouble with that. But he's someone who I could see having an interview with someone on Fox News, the whole kind of like being back, whatever. And same with Pete Buttigieg and others. And then like saying, oh, thank you for having me on to discuss issues and whatever. And then it was a total hatchet job. Yeah. Because they're that's the position they're coming from. That is not Greene or Boebert. There are people who, and maybe the issue is more narcissism or sort of, but there are people who intuitively know and they've been disrespected, and when they've been disrespected, they lash out. So to me, I don't know what your thought on this, but to me, the idea that Greene sat for an interview and is now complimenting Leslie Stahl doesn't translate to that she at any way was pushed back at all. like she would not accept that in any way.
Yeah, no. I think that more than Boebert, I do think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is sort of very smart about how people operate in a way. Like she knows what to say to make these people love her and, go absolutely bananas for her, and also to drive us nuts. Like she knows how to do that. Intuitively, I don't know. Some people are, everyone has a skill set. But I do think that like she has very much tapped into a lot of the wacky on the right. She sees what has worked. And it's obvious that a lot of extremism is what has worked. And she sees that people want to, scream. They want to scream about trans people. That's the thing that they want to do. So she's like, I will also scream about trans people. She also weirdly, a lot of the time will take things, I don't want to say like from the left, but she'll borrow certain things from the left in order to further her own bullshit, like with the jail thing and everything. Like, I'm not saying all of the left, because I realize like a lot of people are like, no, prisons are great. They're fantastic. love cops, love prisons. And like, you guys do you, that's fine. But generally speaking, it is the left that is, a part of the left anyway, that says, hey, prisons are really bad and we should really do something about them. And she manages to make that entirely about just the January 6th people.
Sure.
Because there is a reason to be enraged about that. It's horrifying looking. When we realize what we're doing to people in prisons, it's horrifying. And she's taking that, which is like a legit, it's very easy to get people and reasonable for people to be upset about that.
Mhm.
But she does it in a way where it's like, okay, all of the empathy goes to our people and no one else, because it's only happening to us and not anyone else. And that is a really sort of clever way of just manipulating
Oh yeah.
conversation.
Well, what other than, I mean, Maxine Waters, who's now liked by centrists but prior was not, but other than that, you would not get a mainstream Democrat politician to go like, oh, these poor, to essentially sound like a Bob Dylan folk song about prison conditions. You would never do that. It was seen as
Gauche.
And poison. Like you can't be seen as, even now we're seeing it with the ideas like, oh no, if you don't support setting homeless people on fire yourself, or you don't. And again, I believe that we need to address crime issues, and city we always do. We're going to get hammered if we don't, but the option isn't to do the same thing that we've perhaps always done, or to essentially adopt the right-wing rhetoric. But what happens is, because no one's really talking about prison conditions, because that was always been somewhat unacceptable at that level, then you come in and Marjorie Greene talks about it. I think there were people legitimately who were like, oh my God, they don't get X, Y, and Z, because she was the first one presenting it.
Talk about it. Yeah. And Democrats absolutely do avoid the issue because they, for whatever reason, like they don't want to be associated with like, people like me, because we're crazy radicals who are like, hey, maybe people shouldn't have to drink toilet water. That seems like a bad, cruel and unusual kind of punishment there. She's
well, I always mention the West Wing on this because you never watched it, but there was the whole point where the character played by Rob Lowe, Sam Seaborn, who by all accounts would qualify as sort of a centrist now, but sort of the liberal on the show, was they brought in the perky blonde conservative, and she got a job in the Democratic White House, because God forbid they hire a black woman. And the idea was that was the conversation. So this moderate white cis man and this conservative, the idea that a lawyer the Robin lawyer, the Robin liberal, so he would be on the sort of as far right as the administration goes, and you'd be from the left arguing certain things you just never see, almost always in these productions of a Democratic administration. Is the idea of like, we need to get some of these great ideas from these conservatives, and especially these conservatives who we think
and
of
do them the right way. Well, that was very much the Clinton ethos back in the day. Like, let's take the best ideas from the right and do them better. And I don't necessarily personally think that worked out all that well, but I'm a weirdo like that. But you'll notice like there is so much leeway for Greene to be able to say certain things like that. There's so much leeway for her to be able, like she can say, oh, let's defund the DEA and the FBI and all these other police adjacent organizations. And no one's clutching any pearls. No one's saying, oh my God, but we won't be safe. And, even the freaking, what pisses me off is like the centers who will yell at me and be like, oh my God, but what about Ted Bundy?
Well, I've had to start proactively deleting. I've had to start proactively deleting, because I would write about the latest degree of police violence, a black man either beaten or killed, right? And inevitably someone's like, well, this is the fault of defund the police.
Yeah,
everything. Which is just like, and it's just like, okay, well, this was happening before and this was happening after. And so if the assumption is now that essentially when me, a black person, because the white people lecturing me aren't black. But me, a black person, or my son, a black person, gets killed by the cops or just roughed up in the lark. All you're going to be to have to tell me is that some um, non-actual elected Democrat said defund the police, or an extremist, whereas Republicans are able to talk about defunding the FBI, and they're able to still get
Yeah.
elected and do stuff. And when
And no
and
one,
every excuse, it's like at a certain point, you're like, okay, well, fine. I know you really love being right, but you need to also affirmatively come up with how to stop black people from getting killed, or to stop the police from abusing people. Or it is interesting because you're in Chicago. There's where there was crime issues. Crime always becomes this sense of, okay, well, we've got to start talking like conservatives to deal with crime. Defund hurt us or whatever. We have to have the most pro cop person, even though the cops clearly state. So the centrist argument is like, there is some magical middle ground where we can get the cops to stop being abusive while not scaring them away. And the cops even say, no, I want you tap dancing for me and do whatever I say. And that's, but again, if you have an option, if you have a way to sort of do that, do it, but they don't. And that goes back to Greene, where it's folks who they don't know how to communicate without being snide. They don't know how to communicate without being condescending. And so they can't even attack Marjorie Taylor Greene without sounding like they're attacking perfectly nice white people I went to high school with. Right? Like I will see the attack against Greene, and it'll be like, okay, well, you just insulted this very nice lady who would feed me after school and whatever, no matter, maybe she had no tooth or whatever, but she was a nice lady. You're insulting this person without getting to the fact that the person is racist. Just go after the racism, go after the transphobia, but you don't. You're just kidding them on class issues. That pissed me off. And I'm a black person who grew up in a very racist society.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I have always seen a problem with target, like people making too wide of a target in general. And I've said this before, people like, you can always tell the people that are like, they haven't said shitty things about poor people because they know it's bad to say shitty things about poor people. They don't say shitty things about fat people because they know it's bad to say shitty things about fat people. But as soon as they get that like in where it's like, oh, I can go after these people and be like I can make fun of people for being poor because they're poor and Republican. I can go after people I can make fun of people for being fat because, oh, they're also Republicans. Yes, that feels good to them at that point, but then they're also pissing off tons of other people who also fit into those categories and are not bad. It's the same thing as, making fun of particular states as if, there are states where, literally every single person is bad and evil. And that is, it's not good to go that wide. And like, I feel like that's something that we should let them do. Like bringing it back to this, like let them try and say that, yes, this means that every single trans person out there is violent, when obviously that is not the case, when obviously they sound ridiculous. Yeah, no, that upsets me so much. We have terrible access to dental care in this country. And
we have a sense of we're going to give you health care. Oh, that's great. I've been working this job. You have health care, but not for your teeth or your eyes. But I use my teeth and my eye, like, and they're in my body. Like, no, that's extra. Like, who decided? Like, no, it's just going to be extra. It's like, well, no. I mean, my life would be demonstrably worse without my teeth and my eyes. I feel like it's going to be very hard for me to contribute to society without those. It's going to be part of the package. Like, I don't know, like some of this other stuff.
I mean, both of those things are actually extreme. I mean, we're totally getting off topic here, but both of those things are extremely, extremely important to people's economic welfare in general.
Yes. Well,
because people won't get hired if they're missing teeth. People won't get hired for certain jobs if they can't see.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's I don't think it's off topic, because there's an article in the Post today about the survivors of the Uvalde massacre. Like these are kids with like lead leaching into their bodies. There are people like issues of movement because again, if you survive an assault
Yeah.
from an AK, an AR-15, it's gonna take a while, and we don't have, okay, like the permanent damage. So if you have lingering disabilities to get a job in this country, especially where you are potentially someone who your your options for work was
Mhm.
going to be leaning on your body heavily anyway. But even if you didn't, even if you were like working in publishing, but
Mhm.
if you have chronic health issues, that's going to be very expensive on top
Yeah.
of your student loans and on
Oh,
top of all
well, I
this.
mean,
And they talk about arming teachers, but not about like, hey, what about like a permanent fund for these kids who, or these people who are, their lives are
like the Las
completely amped
Vegas
up.
people, the people in the Las Vegas shooting, so many of them went bankrupt because it's really expensive to be a mass shooting survivor. It's
Mhm,
really expensive to be a victim of crime because, like, oh, they love talking about crime and how, oh, we need the police to prevent crime. But if you actually are a victim of crime, you're kind of fucked.
mhm.
Like, if you don't have great health insurance, and if you're, in a mass shooting, your health insurance is probably going to run out. Um, you're fucked. Like, you're actually truly fucked. Yeah, no, that is,
America.
yeah,
This gentleman, yeah, is dealing with an abscess molar for several years, who I'm sure works, or even if you did not work, you should have. It is just ridiculous
yeah,
of what our priorities on. And I've always been like, I grew up with the idea of like, I want to work with any ideas and fix problem solutions, but they just, I feel like Republicans aren't at all, the current right wing has no, it's just more guns, more guns. And after this shooting was like, okay, let's let's make life worse for trans people, because what we're gonna
yeah,
see is more bans on gender affirming care based on, they're gonna name it after uh one of the white, the youngest white girl victim. They'll probably name it after, because the whole thing is whenever a law is
like,
named
run
after a
the
white woman,
fuck away.
it's bad news. And
Oh, it really is.
and and that's all that's going to come out of it. And
Hmm.
to, and for trans people that week, it was sort of that like, no matter the craziest white boy, and Chris Rock had that routine,
Hmm.
like, if you were black and there was announcing a mass killer, you're like, please don't be black, please don't be black, I've got to go to work tomorrow, I've got to whatever.
Hmm.
But if it's just a crazy white boy, it's like, yeah, he's a lone wolf. It's one person. Why do we attack white people? Let's still put him in charge of everything. But this trans person is constantly identified as the transgender shooter. Trans people are a threat. They're coming to us. They're going to be more violent. And it's getting more and more. And it is just horrific. Something I saw was that the school did have people who were armed. I mean, one of the ladies on the 911 call said, "We don't have security guards, we have staff." So they were armed,
Yeah,
because that's been a constant case of where arming teachers. So that's been going on since, Sa- I think not Sandy Hook, but the Parkman
yeah,
shooting,
yeah,
where guys
Parkman.
get
Yeah,
more
that's when they really
prevalent,
started in on that.
and that hasn't, ever borne fruit. One, because someone prepared to die and arm, they will be more outgunned, and they will also more inclined to actually know where the people are who they need to avoid. So it's not going to work, but it sounds like it will work, similar to like only having one door, so that when
Yeah.
it goes up in flames, all the kids will die. These they
Yeah,
don't
who doesn't love a good old fashioned triangle shirtwaist factory fire? Um,
They were talking about how, I saw someone complaining about how liberals were actually working against, the affordable housing crisis because of all of our crazy regulations against housing. If we didn't have those regulations, we could have more housing more affordably. It's like, except,
without
the
windows.
tenement,
Is that the
yes,
one without windows?
the
Like,
tenement housing. It's like, if you saw the tenement housing, it was in, New
yeah.
York in, battle days. It was like the late, 19th century, early 20th century. I mean,
Hmm.
no, barely, maybe one window, maybe even not that. So poor ventilation, poor sanitation. People were like
I lived down the street
dying.
from Greene. Like it was, and when it was still up, I lived down the street from it. And now it's fancy condos for like rich white people. But
Well, that tends to be the case. I Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll probably find out more about this shooter in Nashville as things develop. Um, and I think whatever, because they don't need to, Republicans don't really care much about facts. So they'll continue to spin it of like this is a clear target against Christians and a hate crime. What was hilarious was the idea that giving the death penalty, which Tennessee already has. So Rick Scott was like, it needs
yeah,
to be the automatic death penalty against mass shooters, which, if you know anything about the psychological profile of mass shooters, they tend to almost always want to die, or if they don't care if they die. So
yeah, that's the
we
whole thing. That's literally why they go with that instead of being serial killers. I think that's my
um
theory. No, but
it is, yes, I mean, serial killers, there's a different sort of
MO there, yeah.
MO and covering their bases and stuff like that. That's more clever than, but
Like
yeah,
they're not trying to not get caught here. Like that's not the issue. Also, the death penalty in general is not a deterrent.
no,
It's
they've
never been
always,
shown to be a
it's
deterrent.
never.
One thing I do like, I mean, maybe not today, but just in general, I think it's worth talking about the fact that Republicans have very, very much ramped up the death penalty talk within the last like year since Roe. Like I think that since Roe was overturned, they've been like running like trying to like find things like that can be like the new abortion. And I think, Trump has been pushing for the death penalty for things that the death penalty is not for, like for drug dealers and everything, at a time when most people kind of agree that the drug war was a failure.
Mhm.
They're very, very much pushing for the death penalty, which is just, I don't know. I think it's an odd move,
Well, they're
but
doing a death penalty for abortion in some places, where they go back and forth. I think South
yeah.
Carolina backed away from it. What I find both appalling and hilarious, so my favorite type of humor, is when so many of the quote unquote good Republicans, this runs from never Trumpers like Jennifer Rubin, Amanda
Mhm.
Carpenter, and others who were full on anti abortion, supported anti abortion candidates, wanted Roe overturned, supported anti abortion judges. And now they're just sort of, oh my God, this law, what? And they're going to stop women from crossing border for abortions. It's like, okay, well, what did you expect would happen? The only way to basically say, Robin, you can't have this medical procedure, is by saying that you are killing someone, and there are laws against killing someone associated with this, and you support the death penalty. Like, what did you
Mhm.
think? Once again, going back to what I said earlier, okay, well, these people pushing for this are evil, but you are stupid if you believed
Yeah.
that this would be any other outcome. And I think whatever, it was always weird to talk to the supposed good Republicans about what they saw of this. They talked about the cultural life and the life. And as you say, whoever they, I don't know what they sincerely believed or not, or whether they're spinning now, but they would always argue that it was this idea that somehow restrictions on abortion would create this idea of like people would not have abortions and would not try. The government would not have to get involved to
Yeah.
force them against it. I mean, and you've written about this where with what Roberts had been doing, and what the stealth move was restricting access. So like a lot of poor women
Mhm.
or people who would get
Well,
pregnant had no access to abortion.
and this has been for years. Like abortion has been effectively inaccessible for many women for many years now, which is
And that was their low key way of doing it.
yeah.
I got that. But to me, it's like, okay, well, you put these radicals on the Supreme Court. And I think, Alito isn't Trump. So Alito is
Mhm.
George W. Bush, the noted painter. And I remember my wife we were watching a Judy Blume interview. And I think my wife was just sort of annoyed that Bush's daughter was there. like, like why? I was like, I don't know. I mean, based on Nepo baby, maybe she would have gotten this job, I'm sure, for normal means. Who cares? But it was this sort of thing of like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway. But um, there has been nothing more radical. Whenever people are talking about death panels, right, and everyone's talking about if you list Elizabeth Warren or even Bernie Sanders, their wish list of stuff, and everyone like so Republicans, centrists would talk about just oh my god, dogs and cats if we had a wealth tax, or oh my god, Medicare for all. Oh my god, it's a catastrophe. What would happen? None of that. None of that is as radical or as actively disruptive or like blow up the world type catastrophic as overturning Roe has proven to
Yeah.
be. And I think again, centrists and quote unquote good Republicans, for whatever the case, would have to agree that this action was worse than probably trying to socialize healthcare. Like
Yeah.
what, like blowing up, saying, okay, and now, okay, I guess are we going to execute women who or people who try to have abortions? Or are we going to what are we going to do? How are we going to treat this? We haven't really thought about it. We'll send it back to the states, but that sorry to go on about this. Well, let's have what we think abortion is murder. That's why we are banning it. But we'll let the states decide. So it's like, okay, well, you understand where if I want to go for a gambling weekend, it's not legal. I go to Vegas. It's a whole market for doing things that is
Yeah.
not legal in my state in another state. So you've thought through that, right? That you understand that leave it to certain states, abortion will still be legal in those states. There'd be a whole industry for that. You would not effectively end abortion the way you would imagine. And it's like, oh crap. Well, I guess we can just stop people from leaving the state. That's fine, right? I haven't read the Constitution in a while. It's just ridiculous. So
Yeah. Well,
the whole Idaho thing of we're trying to penalize for crossing state lines to do something that is legal, which has no fun. I mean, who cares? The hacks they have on the courts now, but it has no fundamental as though you can't
I don't think there's no I think precedent for just banning things for people in your state in general, regardless of where they are. Like that's not a thing.
no, you can't. How do you control that?
Okay, well, even if you go to a state where marijuana is legal, you can't smoke it there because it's illegal in the state that you live in. So it's still illegal for you personally. That's not a
who is going to live in this state? Eventually, you're going to chase everybody out of the state, unless on the Idaho border you're going to cross. It's like, did you get an abortion? Did you do some gambling? Did you smoke some pot? Yeah. It's a very busy weekend of all three of those things.
You have any Kinder eggs with you?
Yes, there was a lot going on with this. So I don't know. We might regroup to talk more about abortion, the issue with abortion later, and but yeah, we'll keep monitoring the issue with trans people. I feel like it's going to continue getting worse. The best we can do is to support them.
Anytime they find a thing that's going to distract from the guns, that's.
The guns I think they legitimately see the guns as a way of keeping safe from people like me. And while
absolutely.
I am delighted that I make white people shit their pants, I would think that that's embarrassing. Maybe you shouldn't. If I am scaring you, if I am some boogeyman for you, maybe you need to reevaluate your life. But that's not happening. So I think we're just going to see more gun violence because they're so scared. As the great Rod Serling said, they find the closest enemy they can find. It is themselves. So, thank you, Robin, and we will see all of you next week. Actually, probably not next week. Next week is Jesus
Easter.
Christ Superstar Day, so maybe we will pre-record something.
Want me to sing Easter Parade again? He still won't learn the Fred Astaire part.
I don't sing. But yes, we might pre-record for Sunday's broadcast. But happy Passover and whatever you're going to be celebrating next week. Take care.